Good morning, everyone, and welcome again to another Customer Success Office Hours. It's me again here, Matt Vandenbeld, vCloud Matt. It's just me here today so far. Hopefully we get some other people coming in, get some ideas going on. I didn't have a lot on the agenda again for today, but I wanted to ensure that we made ourselves accessible here. I'm just clicking around in our new EA org. It looks like we've connected VIDM. So for our integrated authentication, and I'm just kind of working through some of the credentials here. Is our as per usual, our hardware lab has gone through some recent changes, and so we're kind of fighting through some of that, but that's on me. So I just came back from Dell World. And some exciting announcements there. Definitely some stuff I suppose we could talk about regarding that. I'm sure this is a topic hot on the minds of several people. And I apologize if you can hear my dog in the background. But so we had a couple major announcements there at Dell World. One being, I guess the first off being, we had Pat up on stage with Michael Dell talking about the announcement of VMware Cloud on Dell. So what that means is now you can go on to. So this is in beta. So we're planning on releasing it actually second half of this year, which is approaching faster than I think any of us really want to admit. But the premise of this, and I'll see if I can find some links here while I'm talking to you. Is that you can have the same experience of VMware Cloud on AWS with hardware in your own data center. That is on. So that's a SKU that you order through Dell. I'm sure it'll be available through the store or through partners as well. So I'm just kind of trying to find, here we have announcing VMware Cloud and Dell EMC. So I'll bring this up on screen just so something to kind of talk about here. So what this means, is for those customers that have, some compliancy considerations, or performance where they can't have the workloads in the cloud, but they want to have that same managed experience that VMware Cloud has, is you can order this now. There's a VX Rail, VX Rack. There's going to be more SKUs and stuff like that coming down the pipe. You order that hardware. We come out, Dell comes out, a partner comes out, installs it for you, hooks it up to the internet, which connects it to our management infrastructure in VMware Cloud, and it just becomes another. I'd be interested to see if they actually have some kit. VMware Cloud on Dell. A picture of it, but essentially, it just looks like another option within the cloud portal. Like here, you can see that if we were to go back to our cloud services console, in here you would just have VMware Cloud on Dell EMC. So same exact place to manage everything, same cool kind of options, and I think it's actually a really kind of interesting take on it. So use cases obviously is edge locations. And again, we manage all the hardware, all the facilities. And I was just joined by Aidan and Zach. Did you guys want to say hi real quick?
Hi, good afternoon, good morning.
So, sorry, Zach. I think you said hi there.
Yep. Hey.
So I was just talking about and going over. I guess I should share this on Zoom too. The announcements last week at Dell Technology World. So I was just talking about Dell on, VMware Cloud on Dell in EMC. So have you guys heard about that?
A little bit.
Okay.
Not a lot of detail.
So I was playing, the booth guy, trying to last week at Dell Technology World. And we actually had one of the devices in the Cloud City booth that I was at. And I got to admit, it's a very surreal thing last week to see, the CEO of Dell, the CEO of VMware, and the CEO of Microsoft on stage together. I don't know why that's kind of mind blowing to me, but that was a very interesting thing. So we'll talk a little bit later about the Azure announcement as well. But so yeah, cool like a little VX Rail. I think VX Rack is an option. We manage all the hardware for it. We manage all the patching. We do the alerting. We do all the maintenance. We do the remediations. And you just use it essentially like you would everything else in VMware Cloud, which I think is kind of a cool and interesting take on things. And I see it really particular to edge locations, store, retail fronts, those kinds of things is kind of where we're seeing a good degree of pickup on it. And it's a really interesting, like I said, it's an interesting model that, Dell will deliver all this hardware to your data center, but you don't manage it. It's kind of interesting. What do you guys think about that so far?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting concept. I mean, there's a lot of customers out there where they're looking to essentially kind of consume those same types of services, right? But perhaps still have some concerns, whether it be about sort of cloud consumption or latency concerns, etc. So I think it's an interesting approach to overcoming some of those kind of concerns and giving the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I think it's. I can see the use case, and back as in my old days as an administrator, I think I actually would have kind of liked something like this. Now, that being said, I found last week's experience at Dell Technology World a little interesting. So I guess maybe I've been in the software industry too long. I used to be a fairly big hardware fan. I still build my own PCs at home, so I can still keep my nerd card just for everybody out there. But it was a little bit different seeing an audience that was almost more interested in the hardware of it than the software, which was, again, just kind of interesting to me. But there is that large segment of the IT community as well that still, actually does love to go into a data center and look at the hardware and, cable or whatever. But, the amount of people I saw kind of literally crawling around this VX Rail to see what all we had in there. Whereas, I'm used to going to the reInvents and VMworlds to a large degree as well, where everybody's more interested in the interface and what it brings to the place. So just kind of a weird change of mentality, but, this definitely does fit in with the kind of the crowd that actually does like to sit and play with the hardware and look at it. Now, again, they can't really play with the hardware because, we manage it, but it's definitely there, and the specs are pretty good. So yeah, like Aidan, like you said, I think it's good for those that, especially that have some compliancy requirements and or some, higher or lower latency performance requirements. This may serve a little bit better than running some workloads in the cloud. Now, the other major announcement, and I made a little bit of reference to it, and I'll bring it up on screen here, this link that I found, which is actually from the Microsoft site. So for those out there, this may be the first and only time I put up a Microsoft link onto the VMware Cloud Office Hours. And then again, maybe not. It's we are now. Did you guys know this logo existed? I had no idea. I don't know if we just made this up or what, but this VMware Cloud Verified.
I'd certainly seen concepts of this in the past. I don't think I've seen that specific logo, but I'm definitely.
Yeah. So all the Microsoft guys at Dell Technology World had stickers like this, and I actually didn't get one because I kind of not sure I'm in love with that logo. But neither here nor there. So the major announcement part of it is that you can run. So again, I want to preface this. This is not VMware Cloud. This is Azure VMware Solutions. So we can go over some of the subtle differences afterwards. But essentially, what this is Azure offering bare metal hosts to run vSphere, or VCF to be more specific, I guess, or cloud foundation, which is, vSAN, NSX, and vSphere. And it's delivered through partners. So it was a solution through VirtuStream, which is actually, I think we still own VirtuStream, don't we? Well, EMC owns VirtuStream, that Dell owns, that we're part of. Or did we spin off VirtuStream? I think we still own VirtuStream.
Well, I think they're rebranded as something else now.
Okay. Yeah, I thought we still did. Maybe we spun it out. But anyway, at one time, this at least was wholly owned by EMC, which I think it still is. But I got to be honest. Have you guys ever heard of Cloud Simple before? I have not. So maybe I'm just in the dark about this company.
No, I've not seen that personally.
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, no.
Yeah, so it's that one I would have never heard of. So to go back in a little bit of history here, if people remember, I believe it was last year's reInvent. We were spinning up a lot of motion around VMware Cloud on AWS, and Microsoft came out with an announcement that said, "Hey, now you can run vSphere on Azure." And we quickly said, "No, you can't. It's a licensing violation." So this is kind of the way around the licensing violation, because this is a partner-run product, or offering, I guess. It's product is kind of a misnomer, but this is kind of their way of getting around it. Now, I also take this in a very VMware spin, and I'll put it out there as well, that to me, to a degree, this is Microsoft almost admitting we have the better hypervisor. Because if they really truly, believed in Hyper-V, why would they want to offer vSphere on their own cloud? Now, I understand that this gets them into more into a marketplace, but it's getting some of the business that vSphere relies. But that was just one of the thoughts that I had. Do you guys think the same thing to a degree, or am I just being too pro VMware?
I think from their perspective, obviously, there's an element of, I think, as you touched upon, is it opens up new markets and new customer bases for them, doesn't it, really, from their perspective? Much, I guess, like VMware Cloud on AWS does to some extent as well, is that it's a new set of customers and that they can talk to. And VMware is very, I guess, well established in the enterprise space there, as is Azure, obviously. But yeah, I think it opens up more markets, I guess, from their perspective, more opportunity.
I agree, but like I said, in my homeboy thinking, it's if they thought they had a super competitive program, apparently this is, to me, I guess maybe it's kind of like the AWS admission that they can't touch VMware in the private cloud. We just got kind of too big of a market share, and to get a piece of that, they kind of got to play a little bit of our game to start to make inroads. But yeah, so this is the major announcement. But to clarify, this is not VMware Cloud. So this is not a VMware Cloud, a VMware managed service in any way. This will not show up in our cloud services portal. As I said, this is completely delivered by Cloud Simple and VirtuStream at this time. I'm assuming they're going to add more partners as they go forward. They're only in 3 regions right now. I believe there's 2 U.S. and 1 EU. I don't even know exactly when it's going to launch, but this created a lot of buzz, obviously, at Dell Technology World and across the industry for sure. And Microsoft CEO kind of threw a few over the bow at AWS when he was on stage. So it's just kind of interesting to me that VMware, we're kind of now the Switzerland of cloud, as it were. If you want your workloads to run and kind of be welcome and available and neutral everywhere, and well performing. I don't say that neutral doesn't necessarily mean neutral is positive in this sense. Whilst Microsoft and AWS are kind of slinging punches at each other, which is very interesting to me. But I think that's kind of our overall game plan, is to be that neutral provider and to be the guy that works across clouds. And that story, I think, is really truly coming together now. Now that you can move a workload from VMware Cloud on AWS to Azure to on-prem without changing anything, which I think is kind of a really, you think back a few years, and we were just, what is it, 10 years ago? We had vMotion. And that blew everybody's mind. Now everybody's just like, so you can move across clouds. But that really is a truly fantastic thing, to move a VM in its entire state without any kind of refactoring or reconfiguration of any kind between very divergent regions and infrastructures. And again, maybe I'm just drinking too much of the VMware Kool-Aid, but what do you guys think of that?
I think that's accurate. I mean, I think definitely shifted from, going back to like the vCloud Air days, where we were trying to be in, having all these cloud products as opposed to just kind of working with, being more flexible and being the facilitator of this multi-cloud strategy.
Yeah, I think it's just a natural evolution, right, of coming from the virtualization where we started abstracting, servers ultimately, and now really that's come up and up and up with those more layers of abstraction to essentially abstracting data centers and just moving workloads. What's important to business customers is not how many CPUs are there or how much RAM is there. It's just, right, where's the best place to run my application? What gives me the best return on my investment and the best business value? And so I think naturally, as those new capabilities, new layers of abstraction have come, expectations have gone up. So
Yeah, no, I think that's an extremely valid point from both of you. I guess this has always been our long-term game plan, and we're now finally seeing it come to fruition. And I guess to me, it's a little it's one of those funny things that, when it kind of happens, everybody's just kind of like, yeah, okay, cool. Whereas, to me, it's, and maybe I'm just getting too old in the industry. I remember the old days of when you wanted to move a server from one data center to another. You actually went to the data center, pulled it out of a rack, loaded it in your car, drove it across town, and put it back in. Not even to think about moving this thing across a country or across a major region. So I agree. I think that we're continuing to evolve up that stack. Now, one thing I also wanted to mention alongside this VMware Cloud and Dell EMC is this kind of goes in line with what we've announced, I believe, at VMworld this year, of our project Dimension. So, Dimension is kind of the overarching VMware Cloud on-prem code name, product name. I don't know if Project Dimension is actually the final name of it, but whereas we will start to manage more and more into your infrastructure with other partners. Dell EMC being the first to make the announcement. Of course, they're a parent company. That just kind of makes sense. But there will be more and more partners and more hardware offerings where we manage it. Now, I'm always kind of on the fence about this. I think for the VMware Cloud on AWS stuff, I understand that, right? I understand we, with our partnership with AWS, have much more control over the data centers and the physical hardware and its locations and stuff like that when it's an AWS. But there's a whole degree of complexity when this goes into a customer's data center. And I gotta be honest with you guys. This gives me a little bit of a pause, a little bit of a worry of getting into that managing space. Do you think I'm being overly cautious or risk adverse, or what do you guys think of us moving into that managing of private data centers?
I think I guess it's not strictly speaking sort of my management of sort of a private data center, obviously in its entirety. It's of a specific prescriptive solution that would then be running on premises, as you mentioned earlier with the Dell EMC example. So I guess it's a case of ensuring that is, the process there is tightly controlled and kept consistent. Then I think there's a good way to manage that, and ultimately it should be like an extension of what we're doing already with VMware Cloud on AWS in terms of the same techniques, and I guess almost using those same lessons we're learning and evolving and improving continuously in that solution, and I guess allowing customers on premises to benefit from what we're learning there, and make their lives easier, so they can, again, such that they can concentrate on the value add components of running their IT, as opposed to the sort of day-to-day headache of running the sort of hardware and everything that some of them are having to do today.
Zach, what are your thoughts on that? I think that Aidan made some very good points there.
I mean, it's just going to be an extension of kind of what we're already doing with VMC, right?
I mean,
yes.
I'm more thinking of, I think we've all been server admins or some kind of level of admin, or we've all been in data centers at some point. And some of the stupid human tricks I see people do of, oh, we don't need that switch plugged in, or I'm just going to unplug this cable and run it under this other cable, no problem. So while I acknowledge Aidan's point of, yes, this is a very prescriptive, and I'm currently, while I'm talking, trying to find the demo kind of slides that we or walkthrough that we had at the Cloud City booth at Dell Tech World, because it kind of walks through all the stuff. Because one of the screens on there was this very where the customer has to check all these boxes of, you have the adequate cooling, the adequate power, the adequate floor weighting, and all these kinds of things. You have to check these boxes to make, because we can't just deliver this into your farmhouse at the back somewhere. Or maybe you can. I don't know. Or old boss John may have a data center in his farm. I have no idea. It's possible. I know it's actually a fairly big industry, so I guess I shouldn't use barn as a reference, because that actually might be a plausible use case. But it's extending us. And now I guess to another degree, a lot of our internal teams have been managing extremely large clouds internally, and I think that we could probably honestly say that we ourselves are probably the best at breaking clouds with all of the stuff that we do. So there's kind of a wealth of experience out there internally to VMware on how to manage cloud resources. And yes, this is a cloud resource. It's just in someone else's data center, I suppose. I suppose you can kind of look at it that way. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how eager the customers are to kind of adopt that sort of model where you have this, server rack on, or several on-prem, and you don't really own the maintenance of it and everything. So it's going to be kind of a paradigm shift for everyone really that wants to get in on this.
Well, and I found that it's going to be a really it's a very good point, Zach. That especially to that crowd at Dell World. Like I said, I mean, I was literally watching people crawling around the rack to see what was in there. Whereas, again, my mind shift was always more like, well, okay, but how do I actually manage this? How do I deploy some VMs here? How do I move my VMs from here to VMware Cloud? Whereas, yes, I think that we're continuing to push that shift of thinking that even that Aidan mentioned as well, that it's just some hardware. You don't like I know that there's a lot of benefits to different kinds of hardware and performance and all those kinds of things, but this is just a unit of compute and storage and network to run your workloads. You don't need to kind of focus so much on that piece.
Yeah, I think when I sort of look at my sort of career, I guess I was interested in the specific details of CPU and RAM probably 10 or 12 years ago, when we were much more in the case of the server virtualization game. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think that the sort of world has moved on. We're dealing with a lot more abstraction now, and exactly as you say, Matt, I these days I look at a server as it's a unit of compute available to me. There's always going to be corner cases, and always going to be some exceptions where you maybe do want some very specific CPU capabilities, and that's not going to change. But for the 80 to 90% of sort of workloads out there, there's there's a simpler, more cost-effective way, and again, put the energy into the applications and the parts that add the value, as opposed to time and effort into worrying about those really nitty-gritty details of the hardware.
Now, I'll ask a question to Aidan, because this is something that I'm struggling myself, and I'd like to get Zach's opinion too. Is that kind of because of where we're at in our careers, or do you think that that's the industry trend? Because I agree with you that 10 years ago I was I loved getting in the server room and assembling some servers and caring about what processor was in it and how much RAM, what kind of RAM, and so is that just because of where our careers has taken us, or do you think that that's an industry push to not care so much about it? And let me caveat that really quick before you answer. And I don't mean not so care so much about it as it's still a very important thing, just not focus so much on it. Maybe that's the proper word.
Yeah, in my opinion, there's certainly an industry shift in that direction, and the sort of business owners and I guess the key decision makers and the people that fund such solutions are less interested in that detail. They just want speed, agility, time to market, as opposed to having to worry about those details of what sort of hardware they need to buy, etc. I think there might be an element of role as well. People that sort of server administrators that work day to day with hardware, that's clearly going to interest them and do that. Whereas if you're in say more of an architect type role where you're dealing with a solution more holistically as opposed to just the hardware, say components of it, then there's maybe slightly less interest in that specific detail, because you're focusing on other aspects of a broader solution in the context of satisfying a business requirement, as opposed to I don't know, without stereotyping, speeds and feeds, I guess, is the term that's commonly used.
What are your thoughts on that, Zach? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I agree. It's and it's been this way since the dawn of computing. It's abstracting things. Before you had to literally like load code into memory by hand, and now we're all the way here where you can buy a data center that you don't have to manage. So yeah, it's all about the applications, making it easier to run applications. I mean, nobody builds networks and servers just for the sake of it, unless you're in school or something. So if you can make that part easier, and have less decisions, and still have the business requirements for your app met, then it's all for the better, I think.
Yeah, again, I agree. I personally feel, and again, as it might be just be biased, because yes, the industry is pushing us this way, and rightfully so. As opposed to my perspective, but I guess it's kind of impossible to kind of remove the two. So, and yeah, I agree. If I were to go back 10 years in time, where I could have just ordered up a data center with a few clicks of a mouse. I think that could have definitely changed my perspective on how I managed hardware back in those days. Because I think, and we've seen this, especially you and I, Aidan, with some of our customers, how, maintenance and firmware updating and patching is a major thing with customers. And I remember I was doing that too, watching the screens go by, mounting ISOs and all that stuff. If I could have made that problem go away, I would have made that problem go away. And this makes that problem go away. So.
No, absolutely. And that, that can take, exactly as you said, in some of the large customers, that can take considerable amounts of effort and require considerable amounts of resources to deliver that. And, and that's I guess that's a sunk cost, right? That's not directly adding value to the business.
So that's an extremely valuable point. Sorry to jump in, but yeah, like that, yeah, they're literally. Well, I mean, I guess you can maybe roundabout say that it adds value if the patching and maintenance of this brings some kind of functionality that the business requires. But for the most part, yeah, it's fixing a random bug or something that the business, yes, does not care about. I agree. Sorry, continue on with your point.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. Yeah, so I would agree that if it's more of a software update, then absolutely that could be delivering some new kind of capability, and there would absolutely be a business interest in receiving that. But for things like sort of firmware updates, security patches and stuff, and whilst they're obviously clearly extremely important, they're not adding new capability. They're kind of protecting the existing investment. So I think if they're able to sort of offload that to somebody else to do that on their behalf, potentially do that more quickly, more efficiently, and more cost effectively, then that's a win, right?
I agree, and I just kind of look at it from a strictly pain in the rear type of thing. That I don't think I think I can honestly make the statement, and I guess it's probably always going to be that outlier, but I think I can also make the statement that no one enjoys firmware patching. And I'm sure somebody out there comment on YouTube afterwards if you do. But I can honestly, I think that's a pretty safe statement to make, that no one actually enjoys that part of the industry, which is a necessary evil. You got to do it, right? Just recently we went through some security updates. Which again, for the great majority of the customers we had out there was fairly transparent. We did have some migration things that were paused during some of this maintenance, but for the most part, and I guess that's the other thing too is you don't necessarily need to keep up on all of those security things that keep coming up. At least on the hardware layer, you still have to worry about your operating system and application patching, but you don't have to worry about the specters and the meltdowns or these hardware things, because we take care of that for you, which I think is another major plus. And you can go to your security teams and say, yeah, no, we're good. Which I think is something that we maybe perhaps don't focus enough on, but that's kind of a really cool, interesting thing about it. And I'm still looking for this link to go through this demo. Might have to do that on the APJ one later to show how it looks. But as I said, it literally just is another. The VMware Cloud on Dell is just another button on the cloud services portal, and you walk through some screens and you get yourselves a whole bunch of hardware delivered, which I think is again, to me, is mind blowing. I guess maybe we're at the point of the industry where it's just kind of expected. Now, how do you guys think about this announcement in relation to Outposts, which was what AWS announced at the reInvent this year, which I think is in beta as well, and actually becoming more available here shortly. So, what are your guys' thoughts around that? Because we're kind of competing a little bit again with Amazon in that regard.
I think so I guess it depends which perspective you look. I think from a customer perspective, what it means is in the market now, there's a lot of choice for customers, right? They're not sort of stuck to just one or two sort of offerings. So, and I think, um, one of the things that's great with VMware Cloud on AWS is that ability to sort of build solutions that can leverage the best of both solutions. Um, in the sense that you can obviously consume sort of native AWS services and build solutions combined with your VMware Cloud and AWS deployment. So I think it's just a natural extension that what we will probably see is customers that do that perhaps look to consume both um, from the on-prem side of things.
Zach, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I know Outpost has been on the map for several years now, or at least some, maybe not under that exact name, but I heard about the on-prem AWS stuff for a while. I don't know if it's necessarily competing because they're more, I'm not sure what all the offerings are going to be in there, like Lambda, Cloud Formation, and CloudFront, all that stuff. I think it's a different offering than what we are offering. I mean, it's basically like, it is the same as VMC on AWS. I mean, you're just being able to integrate with the AWS services, the native AWS services, and just pulling that down to on-prem. It is kind of interesting though, because a couple years ago it was like, move everything to the cloud. Now it's like, well, sure, you can move it to the cloud, but you can keep it in your own data center. So I think it's just probably based on customer demand. There's probably a lot of customers that don't want to have their data and things in a public cloud. And
Yeah, so I just brought up the Outpost page here on AWS. So it looks like they're offering EC2 and EBS out the gate, and then looking to deliver RDS, ECS, EKS, SageMaker, EMR later. So it's not the entirety of the AWS suite moving in, but I think you made an excellent point there that definitely the market realized, and I was very thankful for that because that made our stock price jump quite a bit. Is when the industry kind of realized that not everybody's going to the public cloud. The private cloud is still a thing, and it's 80% VMware, which I think really changed the dynamic in a lot of these relationships because now AWS while they'll continue to grow their clouds, and I think that's something that AWS will most likely probably always lead in. I'd like to see us get up there, but I think that they'll probably always maintain that. But for them to really kind of truly grow their offering and their market share, they need to get into our backyard of the private data center, and this is their beginning of that. And Azure has done that with their Azure stack as well. Because they've realized that not everything's going public, and that this hybrid cloud thing, and I think Aidan probably, and Zach, I apologize, I'm not, I don't know how much you were into the old VCD and hybrid cloud days, but I know Aidan for sure will enjoy the, how long ago did we talk about this hybrid cloud thing and make it hybrid cloud real? And I think it actually finally is.
Probably longer. I think. So, for example, I guess I started working in the very early days with the Cloud Director back from 2010. So I think that certainly was when we started to, I guess, VMware venture into that space.
And I think that back then, again, everyone knows I'm an honest and pretty transparent guy. It was kind of hybrid cloud. I mean, to a degree. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love vCloud Director. I still love vCloud Director. I don't have as much experience now. I'm very not knowledgeable in the vCloud Director offering now. But as Aidan said, take me back to 2010, and that's what we were doing. it's not the same hybrid cloud it is now. Like, I mean, you look at this hybrid cloud. So I could take a VM on-prem, live migrate it to the cloud, to multiple clouds, VMware Cloud, AWS, soon Azure, IBM Cloud, you name it cloud, move it back, and now I can take that EC2 workload that I made in AWS, and I can, I'm not sure how their migration will work. I don't think that they have kind of quite the seamless migration we may offer. I don't know. But you can take all that EC2 stuff that is costing you a ton of money in the cloud, but your developers made there, and now you can move that to on-prem. So it really is, in my opinion, a true hybrid cloud now, which I think is really cool. It's services everywhere. But it's kind of funny to me that it seems like the push actually for hybrid cloud now is actually pushing services back into the data center as opposed to kind of leveraging out to the public cloud. Or do you think I'm looking at that a little wrong?
I think it is probably in addition to that, but it may be a way to get people to adopt the public cloud. So if they get used to it on-prem, then they'll be more likely, if it's the exact same service in the cloud, then you have that kind of skill set to operate that in that model, and maybe you're more trustworthy. So I think that's probably a big driver as to why kind of going in this direction at this point.
Aiden, did you have a perspective on that as well?
No, I think kind of sort of going back to the sort of VCD point that you say, I guess when we sort of started going down that road, I guess that was sort of laying the foundations for the sort of a VMware kind of cloud approach. But what we didn't have, exactly as you mentioned, is I guess the portability and the flexibility and the agility that we now have with the solutions we have. Also, VMware Cloud Director was a different interface to interact with as well, because it was built as primarily as a multi-tenant based solution, whereas what we obviously have with VMware Cloud on AWS is, as a customer, you can buy your own SDDC that is not multi-tenant. You can control where it is from a data perspective. So I think what you've got now is more control. You have a more familiar interface in terms of its vSphere again, and you have a lot more portability and agility built up around that offering, which makes it much more easy to consume.
Yeah, I think that there's good points there, for sure. I think yeah, Zach. Maybe you framed it a little bit better than I did. That it seems to me that the public cloud is driving the features and innovation, um, which are then filtering down to the private cloud, as that functionality is enabled. So I guess if you still want to be an early adopter and cloud native, and so I guess do we need another term as well as opposed to cloud native, because of the hybrid world we work in? Not that I want another acronym or another buzzword, microservices architecture as opposed to cloud native, because I mean cloud native doesn't have to run on cloud, especially in this world where even Amazon's taken EC2 and RDS and EKS and all these services back to on-prem. I mean, I guess it always depends on your definition of what the word cloud means, which I know is always a fun one to discuss. But I guess what are your guys' thoughts on that? I guess there's even, like to your point, Aiden, there's now even more flexibility around how you develop and deliver applications than there ever was before.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, I think you don't have to have an either or anymore. You can consume that kind of, I guess, best of breed approach, if you like, and build solutions that consume the individual services and components that can give you the best solution and combine them together, as opposed to having to just pick one or the other.
Yeah, and I think the cloud native term at this point, and where like what say like Kubernetes, Docker, those folks are pushing is, and even VMware is any cloud, any app, any cloud. So um, yeah, just being able to have that flexibility to push to AWS or GCP or Azure or your own private pivotal cloud or anything really, um, is just kind of really giving businesses that flexibility to manage their operational overhead and cost. And it's I think we're right at the forefront of that. So it's going to be a pretty interesting here in the next couple of years.
Yeah, and I guess to my earlier comment a little bit too, I agree with your point, Zach, is that it also depends on your definition of cloud. Because cloud is your own data center now too. Potentially, I mean, I guess we could always go with the meme of a cloud is just somebody else's computer. I guess that kind of rings true. It's now wherever you want to put the workloads. And one of the things that I quite often I try to fight, and I bring it up in VMUG talks and wherever I kind of can, is something you touched upon a little bit, Zach, as well, as you don't, just because you're an EC2 doesn't mean you have a cloud native app, right? It's when we get that thinking in the industry that, well, as long as my workload is running in AWS or in GCP or in Azure or even VMware Cloud on AWS, well, it means it's a cloud native app now because it's running in the cloud. And I don't, that's not what that actually means. Or am I misunderstanding what cloud native apps are?
No, I think you're right. Yeah, because EC2 is not EC2 are just VMs running on a Xen hypervisor, right? Or what do they run? KVM. Yeah. No, I think you're right. Cloud native is that flexibility to deploy the app to anywhere basically, and even across clouds. You could have it running in both sides. It's that kind of ephemeral nature. In my thought, is that's what I kind of think that term means is, it's not that the old 3-tier app kind of style anymore. It's to have the flexibility to basically push your app anywhere in any cloud in the world, anytime, and have it up and running in minutes.
Yeah, I think we need to change that nomenclature a little bit to, and maybe that already exists, and I'm just not aware of it. But like you said, it's more of like a microservices distributed application architecture. That's what I think of when I think of quote unquote cloud native apps, not a server running in EC2. What are your thoughts on that, Aidan?
Yeah, I sort of tend to agree. So it's, as we sort of said earlier, I look at EC2 as essentially that's infrastructure as a service. You're running a virtual machine in AWS's cloud, I guess, irrespective of what the hypervisor is. That's not a cloud native approach to an application. It's almost an AWS native, would be that's another way of describing it. Whereas obviously sort of cloud native is more an approach to how you build and deliver your applications in those services, not just here's a bunch of VMs or EC2 instances, depending on which hypervisor technology you're using.
Yeah, like I said, I think that there's just, and to a degree, we've been a benefit of some of that because I know some customers that have been answering mandates of CIOs and CTOs and stuff that have been fairly specific of saying we need to have a public cloud presence by the end of this year. And by far the easiest way of doing that is to use VMware Cloud on AWS because you're running VMware on-prem and you can just basically lift and shift that workload over, but I feel like in some cases that's not necessarily what the executives are wanting by that. But I think maybe even they're caught up in some of the hype and keeping up with the Joneses, as it were, of having a public cloud presence just for the sake of having a public cloud presence. Do you guys think that that's a thing?
Yeah, I think so to an extent. Or maybe in the last a couple of years, it's like, oh, everyone's moving to the cloud. Well, we need to do that. But I think a lot of people just try to forklift apps into the cloud instead of refactoring to take advantage of it. So I think now with
But to question kind of one of the comments you just made there, do you think even refactoring answers that? It just makes it a different VM type in the public cloud.
I think it depends on your definition of refactoring, right? So I guess based on that, refactoring in the sense that if you just convert everything to EC2 instances and you're doing say little else, then yeah. Whereas obviously if you are taking an application that's running on VMs and I guess completely rebuilding that to consume a whole different set of cloud services, whichever cloud provider that comes from, then that's different, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree, and that's kind of the root of my question is that again I think that there's a lot of executive and a lot of momentum out there just to get into the public cloud, that they're just moving stuff up there. Um, and again, now there's a lot of advantages of it, especially in my perspective. And again, a little bit of a we used to call a homer here for loving our own products, but the ease of management, the ease of scale, all those kinds of things, I guess, is what the public cloud offers. Is that something what you need? But I still think that there's just so much of there's this industry push, and no CTO doesn't want to have on his resume X amount of services running in the public cloud, and they don't really care if that's necessarily efficient, or am I being a little bit inflammatory in that statement?
Uh, I think that's it, and it depends. Answer. I suspect. I think in some cases, there's going to be plenty of customers out there that have gone through a business case analysis and concluded that um, that either financially it makes sense, or technically and financially, or one or combination of those is it's a good thing for them to do. Or it may even be in some cases that financially it's going to make sense, but they're going to maybe make some technical compromises, but the business benefit outweighs. So I guess there could be any number of different combinations of those motivations to move. Equally, there may be some where, yeah, it's just a decision has been made to adopt cloud as opposed to having a strong and solid business case as well. I think you'll get, as with anything in the world, I think you'll get a people on a different parts of the spectrum in that regard, from very extremely well thought out and planned out. So some of the customers I'm working with, they sat down, worked out what it's costing them to run their data centers, concluded actually they can probably do it more efficiently, consuming VMware Cloud on AWS and combinations of AWS services as well, as opposed to running it on premises.
No, I agree. I think.
Others are
Sorry, go ahead.
moving it because it's a cool thing to do, or so.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly with your statement there. As I think, as everybody knows me as well, I love the it depends answer a lot of times when I get a question, because a lot of things do depend on your use cases and your motivations and such. Now, another question, and we only have about 5 minutes left here, so this will be an interesting one, because I really would like your guys' perspective on this, and perspective for the people watching and on YouTube as well. Is so the percentage still, I think, of applications in the world are still, I guess, what we would call actually. Naran Evanchan had a great line for this on Twitter, as opposed to calling it traditional, call it vintage. Vintage applications of the kind of monolithic or 3-tier app type infrastructure, I think probably would run still the majority of the applications out there. And that change is coming towards, that cloud native or, microservices type architecture we're talking about. Do you guys foresee or think there's ever going to be a day when everything's microservices? I don't know if it makes sense for every application, or where do you think that percentage is ultimately going to arise? Because I personally don't think that there's ever going to be a day where you don't have a traditional, quote unquote, no one can see me do air quotes, but a traditional type application architecture.
I guess the way I look at it is the reality is that any large IT estate is always going to have some form of state of transition in it, right? Where you've got some sort of legacy components, you've got some components that you are moving to the sort of latest and greatest approach to IT, whatever that is at the time. So at the moment, there's a strong movement towards public cloud. As you mentioned, there's looks at moving towards microservices, and in the future, there's going to potentially be something else, some other new way and better way of doing something. So I think all customers are always going to be unless you're particularly small and can move extremely fast. I think there's always going to be a state of transition in IT organizations where in various parts of their infrastructure are at different stages of transition or steady state.
I agree. Zach, you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think pretty much every in user app could definitely be converted, and then, but like you said, I don't think everything will be, because there's always going to be a need for high performance, specialty apps, and even stuff like, I mean, I guess it'll just depend on how fast processors become, or if they can outpace that, overcome the drawbacks, and also networking. I mean, when you go into that microservices architecture, your bottleneck then becomes the network, because everything is not running in memory. So I think performance, SLAs are going to affect how fast that happens and what type of apps can be made into that sort of architecture. But I think a lot of stuff, I mean, if Google, Facebook, Amazon, they're all running, all their apps are running that way. So just depends.
No, valid points. So I think I'll take this time to wind up. We've got a couple minutes left. I appreciate Aidan and Zach jumping in here. I appreciate the viewers we have on Twitch and those watching on YouTube. I still firmly believe in 15 years, when I wind up my IT career, we'll be putting one application on one piece of physical hardware somewhere, because that's just kind of the way this industry works. So, we'll see what the next evolution is, but this is the current one. Some housekeeping items. There will be no AMER office hours tomorrow morning or tonight in the Western world, but Will, the guy who usually hosts it, got all selfish and went and had a baby as opposed to doing his job. Well, his wife had the baby, but he's off on paternity leave for a little while. Wish him the best of luck, and I personally would be rather running the office hours than dealing with newborn babies, but maybe that's because I've been there and done that. But anyway, so there'll be no AMER office hours this week. There will be an APJ one on Thursday that I'll be hosting, hopefully joined with some of our APJ. The APJ time has also changed. It's shifted later to make it a little bit more accommodating to those in Bangalore and the rest of India. So it's now, I believe, noon in Sydney, 10 o'clock in Tokyo, and I think it's like 8:30 or something in Bangalore, because I got that weird half-hour shift, or it might be 7:30. I can't remember which way the half hour goes there, but check it up on the events page. So just to let everybody know, that time has changed slightly. Next week, we're going to have the Wavefront guys on for a webinar. That will be in the APJ time frame, so it'll be 7 p.m. Pacific time. We'll be talking about Wavefront with our Wavefront team, and I think the Wavefront thing goes right in line with the stuff we were discussing today around a very application-centric thing, a way of looking at things across clouds. So I'm looking forward to that. We're going to have some of that team in. We'll do some demos of it and talk about it next week. Then I guess 3 weeks from today, we'll also have Daniel from our VCPP team, a good friend of mine who's going to come on. He's going to talk about the VMware Cloud Provider, or VMware Cloud Provider, Partner. Anyway, program, what it means to customers, what it means to partners, and a little bit of the cloud platform services business unit and what it does for VMware. So these events are all up on the Twitch event page. You can sign up there for some notifications. Again, I appreciate everybody for watching, and I do appreciate, again, like I said, Aidan and Zach jumping in and offering their very intelligent and well-versed, verbose thoughts on a lot of these issues and things that are coming up in the industry. Lots of stuff to check out. Lots of blogs that I put up on here around if you want more information around the VMware Cloud on Dell EMC or the Azure VMware solutions or Outposts or anything like that. You can always reach out to me on Twitter at vcloudmatt or email us at cloudcs@vmware.com. And we're here again to answer any questions and to help you guys out. And if we don't have questions, we always seem to somehow find something to talk about that is hopefully interesting to the community out there. But with that, I'm gonna call it here and look forward to seeing everybody next week. Actually, we'll do the office hours next week as well and the webinar. So the office hours for the Americas will be at the same time next week, and then we'll have the webinar later that night. So to wind it up, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for, again, to Aidan and Zach, and I will see everybody Thursday, if not next week. Talk to you later.